We'll do a review in Likutei Sichas in Chelek Tezayin, volume 16, the fourth sicha for the Parshas Yisro. This is a Rashi sicha, and the Rebbe discusses two Rashis. One before Matan Torah, the pasuk says in Perek Yutes pasuk Chov, the pasuk says, "Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai el Rosh Hahor." Hashem descended onto Mount Sinai, and Rashi discusses how did Hashem actually descend when the pasuk says that Hashem remained min hashamayim debarti mochem. We have a similar Rashi after Aseres Hadibros. Over there it says, "Vayemer Hashem al Moshe koisoymar of Yisro atem reisim ki min hashamayim debarti mochem." And over there too, Rashi discusses the difference that over here it says min hashamayim, and here it says vayered Hashem Har Sinai. These two Rashis are different. Rashi the Rebbe is going to explain the differences in the Rashi, that the first pasuk is coming to emphasize how Hashem came down to the world. The second pasuk is coming to emphasize the fact that Hashem spoke from Haya, from Shamayim, which brings about the two pshatim in the second Rashi. There's only one pshat in the first Rashi, the Diyukim, as the Rebbe goes through point by point. It's also very interesting. At the end of the sicha, the Rebbe brings the wonders of Rashi, also the psukim number. Over here, it's Perek Chof Pasuk Yutes the second time, and the first pasuk is Perek Yutes Pasuk Chof. So it's Yutes Chof over here and Chof Yutes, and the Rebbe will explain how everything that shows on Keser and the various different levels as we'll learn inside the sicha. Let's go inside in the sicha, and we'll go step by step. Aleph. Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. So the pasuk says in the beginning, before the Aseres Hadibros, it says that Hashem descended on Har Sinai. Is Rashi Mefarish? Rashi explains, Yochel Yorad Olav Mamish. So you might think that Hashem actually descended onto the Mount Sinai. Olav Mount Sinai actually descended. Talmud Leimar. Therefore, the pasuk says later on, after Matan Torah, it says, "Ki min hashamayim dibarti imochem," that I have spoken to you from the heavens. The Lamas, this teaches us. Chulu, Rashi brings down, like we'll see later on in Siv Gimel. The Rashi says that the Eibishter sort of bent down the Shamayim, Shmei Shamayim, and he spread it like a bedspread over the Har Sinai. So Hashem was still min Hashamayim, and it was still a Har Sinai because it was like a Shamayim, the Shmei Shamayim covered the Har Sinai, as the Rebbe will bring down later for the Rashi. But right now, we're trying to figure out what is Rashi's problem. So one thinks that Rashi's problem is, because here it says, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, and later on that means that Hashem wasn't Har Sinai. Later on it says Min Hashamayim. This is Rashi's problem, as Rashi brings down the problem later on in the second pasuk in Chav pasuk Yutes after Matan Torah. But we hadn't learned that pasuk yet, so the Rebbe is going to argue and show that this can't be. The Rebbe is trying to figure out what is Rashi's problem. That Rashi's problem must be that somehow from this pasuk itself, without bringing in the other pasuk, it almost seems that Yochel Yorad Olav Mamish, that you might think he Mamish descended upon him. Let's look inside. In Pashtus Lerman, that's why the Rebbe doesn't go in yet to explain the specific of the Rashi, just trying to figure out what is Rashi getting at? What's Rashi's problem over here? So in Pashtus Lerman, simply the way we learn, as Rashi kommt verantworten die Stira von the Psukim, that Rashi is coming to answer the contradiction seemingly from these verses. Dort steht in our pasuk, it says, "Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai." That Hashem descended on Mount Sinai. So where was Hashem? Hashem was on Har Sinai for Matan Torah. Was bepashtus meintes yorad olav mamish. So he descended means that he was actually on the Mount Sinai. Which better state later on in Pasuk it says Kimin Hashamayim dibarti mochem, that Hashem spoke to you while he was still in the heavens. So how does this match up? One of them, and Rashi Melamed Chulu. So Rashi says that it's not a contradiction because it was on the mountain and the Shemayim, because the Shemayims were on the mountain. Hashem spread them out on the mountains. So it was both. But the Rebbe says, we can't really say that this is Rashi's intention over here. But number one, Aleph. If Rashi just wants to ask a contradiction, why does Rashi need to introduce and say, you might think that he descended actually? Rashi should have started with a question. You should have said there's another pasuk that says, one pasuk says that it was from the heavens, and then give the answer. Why does Rashi start? Oh, you might think, which means nothing to do with the other pasuk. You might think that he actually heard that there is a thought on itself. The main question is this contradiction, vision, between these two verses, this only becomes difficult. The contradiction is when we learn the next pasuk. After Matan Torah and Perek Chov pasuk Yutes, over there it says Kimin Hashamayim Gomer. Question is, so here it says Vayered, that he was on Har Sinai. There it says Hashem was in the Shamayim. We have a contradiction. So Rashi should address it over there. Why is Rashi placing himself on the contradiction already in our verse? Especially later on when it says Min Hashamayim, Rashi actually bases himself on this contradiction. Which Rashi over there in Chav Yutes, Rashi brings down our pasuk from before Matan Torah from Yutes Chav. And he says that there's another pasuk that says Hashem and Har Sinai. When over there it says Min Hashamayim, it'll come on Siv Daled, as we'll be discussing later on Siv Daled. So Muzman Zog. So therefore, what do we have to say? As Rashi kum don nitzu varenturen distire for the same sukkah. Rashi isn't coming here to answer the contradiction of these two verses. Nor as in them pasuk do. But it's only in this pasuk while we're just learning this pasuk. Before we even know that there's another pasuk that says Hashem spoke with Hashemayim, is Farana Sofik. We have a doubt, a question. We're not sure. Yochel, you might think that there might be that maybe Hashem actually descended. It's in it, maybe not. Since we don't have a way to decide this question, this doubt, did Hashem actually return? That would be within here. That's why Rashi brings evidence that it was actually not mamish. Over here, Yochel mamish. Rashi brings if we don't have a proof. So Rashi brings a proof on Avaita Dikum Pasuk. Talmud Loimar Kimin Hashamayim Dibarti Mochem. That is, Taka was not mamish descended on the Har Sinai, because the pasuk says Min Hashamayim Dibarti Mochem. So how did it take place that the Shemayim were spread out over the Har Sinai, over the Mount Sinai, and Hashem with the Shmei Shemayim, with the heavens descended onto Mount Sinai? So what we need to understand, why is there a doubt? Why do we have over here a question? You may think that he actually descended. Why? Why not? It says Vayered, he descended. It's not because of the other pasuk. So you seem like somebody want to say he didn't descend. Rashi proves that he didn't descend. But why would we say that Hashem didn't actually descend? So the Rebbe explains that it's a little bit problematic to say that Hashem descended on the Mount Sinai Mamish, because the pasuk says that there was smoke over there, but if Hashem descended with a fire, actually onto the Mount Sinai, there should have been a big fire there, not just smoke. Let's look inside. Based the beer in them, the explanation is in Afrir, the pasuk state in a previous verse. It states over there, Bahar Sinai Oshan Kulei. The entire Mount Sinai was smoked. Because Hashem descended on the Mount Sinai with a fire. So it says that Hashem descended with fire on the Mount Sinai. As the Bark hot nor but the verse says that the mountain was smoking. Overneath as the Bark, but it's not like the mountain was gefinzig of him, and the items that are on the mountain had gebrannt, that they were burning. It would seem if the fire descended actually onto the mountain, then the mountain should have been burning. Should have been a fire on the mountain. Especially should be fire over there, especially the growing things that are on the mountains. It says before in the pasuk when Moshe Rabbeinu came to Har Sinai, over there it says, as I've Har Sinai is given a sneh, there was a sneh, the tree of a sneh, but Pashtus is just not given the einziger sneh. Simply speaking, that wasn't the only sneh on the mountain, or the tzemach of Har Sinai, or the only growing thing on the Mount Sinai, the one that Moshe Rabbeinu encountered over there before, in when he went with the sign from Yisro over there. Man kann sagen, as das was der Berg hat nicht gebrannt, that the reason why the mountain wasn't burning, nor gerechet is given an es. Maybe it was some miracle. Hashem made that it only worked, but why would that happen? Why make this special miracle? And this idea, as the Rebbe says, we see already there was fire burning there, because that was the sneh which Moshe Rabbeinu envisioned. He saw the sneh burning. This is already before we read by Sneh Har Sinai. When we talk about the sneh Mount Sinai, it says that it was burning. The fire is glatter to lernen azazois as given al pitava. So therefore, it's more smoother to say that it was naturally that it didn't burn over there. Why? Hashem is nit yorod al mamash. It didn't actually descend on it, mamash. So it says vayeretz of Rashi yochel, that it's possible that it actually went down on the mountain. Yochel yorod al mamash. Maybe that it actually went down. And then we have a problem. Why wasn't it burning over there? So maybe it didn't go down. That's why it didn't burn over there. It stayed removed higher than the bark. It didn't actually come down higher. The river oder har nit gebrannt. Therefore, the mountain itself wasn't burning. But it was just smoked up, all of it. It was because of the fire which was close to the mountain. So the smoke came around the mountain, but the fire never went there. That's the nature of fire. As Venice is genug non sa'azach, that when he is close enough to an item, so while the fire may not catch on the item, but yet the smoke is going to get a rush from the Zachanoshim. There is smoke going to come out of there. Und der Fahrer sagt Rashi gleich da. That's what Rashi says. Yochel, Yored Olav Mamesh. You might think that it actually went down or didn't go down, because why didn't it burn? So maybe it didn't really go down. From the psukim da vert amokim l'sofik to Yored Olav Mamesh. From the verses here, we're not sure, did actually Hashem descend on the mountain? So it almost seems like from here, it's more logical to say that Hashem did not actually go down on the mountain. But the Rashi proves it from where? Because it says that he didn't go. So why do we have to need another pasuk? So why don't we conclude that Hashem Yochel Yorad of Mamish? He did not go of Mamish, not because of another pasuk, because over here, logically, it makes sense that he didn't go down. So the question is, so the Rebbe is asking, therefore, why don't we conclude that from the pasuk here without having to bring a proof? Because it says later on, Hashem was min hashamayim dibarti moch. Based on this, we have to understand on the other side. Why is this only a doubt? So in other words, we don't conclude that it didn't go down, but Rashi is not sure. And Rashi needs the evidence from the Vaitadikum Pasuk, from the Pasuk after Matan Torah, it says, Kim min hashamayim goymer, as lo yorad olav mamish, that the Hashem did not actually descend on the mountain itself, actually, because this we know from the previous pasuk. It says, it doesn't say that the Mount of Sinai was full of smoke. It doesn't say Mount Sinai was burning. Canal as mentioned before. So therefore, we know that Hashem didn't actually descend onto Mount Sinai. Now, why does Rashi need the other pasuk? And the Rebbe is going to bring now the rest of the Rashi. Rashi explains from the other pasuk. We're left with the question, while we understand why Rashi would think in our pasuk that it didn't descend Mamash and Har Sinai because it didn't burn, but that should be enough evidence. Why does Rashi not accept that and needs evidence from later on that it says Min Hashamayim Dibarti Mochel? So now the Rebbe brings down the actual continuation of the Rashi's explanation. So if Hashem didn't go down because the pasuk says later on Hashem spoke with Hashemayim, so what happened over here? So Rashi Mamshich, weiter is Rashi Mamshich, Melamed, this teaches us Shehirchin, Shamayim, Helyonim, V'tachtonim, that the Eibishter sort of lowered down the upper and lower heavens, the Shamayim, the seven heavens, all the heavens from above, the Tzion al Gabe Hahor, and he spread them out over the mountain, Kimatza alamita, just like a spread on the bed, a sheet, a bedspread over the bed, Hashem spread out the Shamayim over the mountain, the Yored Kisak over the Aleim, and the honorable throne of Hashem descended onto the Shamayim, which was spread out on the Har Sinai. So now this has a source in the Mechilta, but the Rebbe says Rashi doesn't quote the Mechilta, so Rashi's Pirush makes sense. The Mokar from the Pirush is in Mechilta. The source for this interpretation is in the Mechilta. Aber we get shoin feel mol, but we already spoke many times. Is Rashi Maitik in sein Pirush? Rashi only quotes in his commentary nor di midrash Chazal was seinen al derech hapshat. Only those midrashim that are sages of blessed memory that go on the line of the simple meaning. And those that are connected and important to the simple meaning of the pasuk. This is always what Rashi brings down, and that would be even if Rashi brought down the reference. But in our pasuk, Rashi doesn't even say where he's taking his commentary from. Befrat in unser Fall, especially in our case, was Rashi zeichnet nicht on. Rashi does not point to no reference. Wie tut immer ertes. Rashi does do in many places. Rashi sometimes gives a source, but Rashi doesn't give a source to his commentary. Is muchach, that's evident, therefore, as their pirush mit allen seinen protim, that this commentary of Rashi with all the details, so how does he know this? Not from Mechilta. It's not, the Mechilta said so. Not from Pshuta Shel Mikra. That's the simple meaning of the verse. That's why Rashi doesn't make any reference because this is the simple meaning of the pasuk. So we need to understand. So leave masbir zayin ve'azoi beide zachen. That in order to explain how these two things, that on one hand, Aleph in the first pasuk it says Vayered, that he descended Hashem al Har Sinai, and based in the other pasuk it says Min Hashemayim, that Hashem speaks to heaven, the Bartei Mochem, Ken Zayin Zusammen. How could they be together? That Hashem was on Mount Sinai, Hashem was on the Shemayim. Is l'chayre genug zu sagen bekitzer would be seemingly to say in brief, short, Melamed Shirichin Shemayim. So this teaches us that Hashem lowered the heavens onto the mountains and he descended on them. On the Shemayim with the mountain, with the Shemayim descended on the mountain. So where does Rashi take these other details? Brings the upper and the lower Shemayim. Where does that come from? Base. Not only that he lowered in Chulu, he spread them out. Where does that come from? Gimel, in them Gufa doesn't say Rashi just spread them out. He says like a bedspread, like you spread over a bed. Where does that come from? And Daled Vayered. So it says Nit Hashem Kilshen Apostle. It doesn't say V'yorad Hashem, Vayered Hashem, the pasuk Hashem. Rashi doesn't use the lashon pasuk. No kisa kovid aleh. So why these changes? The Rebbe points to all these 4 points that Rashi adds, which seems to go beyond his explanation. Why does Rashi bring all these things down? This is the Rebbe. We need to understand this Rashi before Matan Torah, Pairik Yutes Pasuk Chof. Now, let's compare this to the Rashi in Perikah Pasuk Yutes after Matan Torah. So, Daled, Noisef to the Diyukim and then Pirush Rashi al-Asar, in addition to these difficulties that we have in the commentary of Rashi over here in the Pasuk, Perikah Yutes Pasuk Chof. Now, we also need to understand, how does Rashi's commentary here fit with his commentary on the other verse, from the heavens I spoke to you, Rashi says there. Where is Mefarish? There we're quoting now what Rashi says over there in the second pasuk. Over there Rashi says like this, because the pasuk says there, I spoke to you from the heavens. So Rashi says, but the one pasuk says, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, that Hashem descended on Mount Sinai. So was Hashem in Hashemayim and it was Mount Sinai. So here Rashi gives 2 answers. The first answer, Rashi says, Bo hakosuv hashlishi v'yichriya b'neim. So we have a third pasuk that comes in and it compromises between these 2 psukim. He shows us a middle way between these 2 decides between these 2 psukim. Min hashamayim ishmiyachoes koiloi liyasreko. It was from the Shamayim where Hashem had you hear his voice. So the voice of Hashem came from the Shamayim. Liyasreko. And v'al ha'oretz, and what took place on the ground on Har Sinai, had Acha as Isha Hagadola. Over there, he showed you his great fire. Rashi continues, Kvoidoi b'Shamayim, Hashem's glory, his honor was in the heavens, Isha Ugvorosei ala Oretz, and his fire and his strength was on the ground. So there was both true. Part of it was above and part was below. That's the compromise, deciding in the third pasuk. The Rashi continues, Dover Achar. Another interpretation. Hirchin Shamayim Ushmei Shamayim. Hashem lowered the heavens and the heavens, Shmei Hashemayim. V'yitzin alahor, and he spread them on the mountain. V'cheinu Eimer. There's also a pasuk that says so in Shmuel Beis, and also in Tehillim. It says, Vayet Shamayim Vayered. He spread out the Shemayim and he descended. This is 2 Purushim and the Rashi over there. is Tamua. So this is a little surprising. First of all, in our parsha, there's only one pshat. Rashi doesn't bring any other pshat. In unser pasuk, breakt Rashi nor dem pirush Yirchen Shemayim Chulu. Over here, Rashi brings only the commentary that Hashem lowered the heavens. Unoi from pasuk in Hashemayim Gomer zokt Rashi. Over there, Rashi says, first of all, Aleph Nocha Pirush. First of all, there's another interpretation. Beis that ain't sicha Pirush do. This that is only the only. There's no other commentary over here. So what Rashi explains over here comes there as a second interpretation. Rashi says Yirchen Shemayim Chulu kum dort al zweiter Pirush. Over there it becomes the second interpretation, which means this haste it is nid der Pirush ikri leif pshuta shel mikra, that according to the simple meaning of the pasuk, it's not the main interpretation that it was Hirchin, that Hashem lowered it, but the other, the Chriya B'neim Pirush, the first Pirush. So the question is, not only does Rashi say there a second Pirush, and by us is only one Pirush, over there the Pirush that by us comes there as the secondary, which means that Rashi doesn't take it over there as being the main pshat. And by us, this is the only pshat. So which one is it? Further, we need to understand. So there are certain details over there that Rashi doesn't bring down. Bishloima. So we understand was dort is Rashi mashmit in the zweiten Pirush, that in the second Pirush Rashi leaves out the protim kemat salamito, like a spread over the bed, and that the kisa koved descended, which Rashi brings over here, basar zogdo, which he says over here, kemen zogen, we can say as Rashi is relying on what he has said already before earlier in his commentary. Just brings the general pirush. So things that Rashi leaves out in the second one, and were already mentioned in the first Rashi, that's understood why Rashi does that, because he's relying on what he already said. But now, but we need to understand why the changes, why the addition in the second Rashi that are not found in the first Rashi. What are they? Aleph. By us, Rashi uses the term do zokter shamayim halyonim v'tachtonim, the upper and lower heavens. Und dorten, over there, he uses language shamayim u'shmei shamayim, the heavens and the heavens. Base number 2, dort is a moisif araya from Pasuk. Over there, Rashi adds a proof from the Pasuk. So the Pasuk says that he spread out the Shemayim and he descended. So here we don't have a proof. So either way, if it needs a proof, why didn't Rashi bring it over here? If it doesn't need a proof, Rashi didn't bring it over here, why does Rashi need a proof over there? If this interpretation requires evidence from a verse, we have to bring down the Chenu Eimer, but the Rashi could bring the Rayis, Rashi should have brought these evidence, then Erstmal, when I bring the Pirush, the first time that he brings the commentary. And number 3, the Bald as er bringt a Rob dort Norden Klolus a Pirush on alle Protkinal, since Rashi just brings down the general commentary and leaves out some without bringing down all the details. So why does he bring down that detail that he spread them out over the mountain? Bifrat as in them posig was bringt l'raya, especially the verse that Rashi brings as evidence to this idea that Hashem spread it out. State nor vayet shemayim. Was made Hirchen. Hashem just says that he lowered it. It doesn't say spread it out. Only them prat, but it doesn't mention in that pasuk this detail from the Yitzion Chulu that he spread it out. So what's going on over here? So hey, the biur bekol zeh. So the Rebbe explained that there is a difference between what the psukim are trying to tell us, the pasuk before Matan Torah, in order to describe the what's going on, how Hashem descended on Mount Sinai, and the psukim after Mount Torah is to describe how Hashem gave it min hashamayim. And that brings about the differences in the Rashis. The Birba calls that the chilukim zwischen the zwei Perusha Rashi, the differences between these two commentaries in Rashi, Zainen mitzadam chiluk klolu, they are because of the general distinction, difference between the psukim da, and in the parsha and in the portion of Atem Re'isem Kimin HaShamayim Debarti Mochem that you've seen that I spoke to you from the Shamayim. The Hemshech von the Psukim da bringt arois the flow of the Psukim over here expresses wie der Eibishter hat Arov genidert auf Har Sinai, how Hashem descended on Mount Sinai in an oifen golu leinkod. Talks about Hashem's descent in a way that was visible to everybody. That's what we're trying to describe in our psukim. Bizas that har alein hod bakumen kedusha, to the extent that the mountain itself received a holiness. Und the far, because of the holiness of the mountain, you should be careful of going up to the mountain. No hand can touch the mountain. The people cannot go up to Mount Sinai. Limit the mountain, sanctified. We see all these psukim are talking about the sanctity, how Hashem's holiness descended into the mountain, which brought about all these different limitations and sanctity of the mountain. Therefore, now by us understand why Rashi needs proof that it was min hashamayim and is not concluding it by himself. As lo yoredol of mamish, Rashi didn't actually descend on it. Choch state, as we said before, notwithstanding, it says Varsinai blows Oshan Kulei Canal base, it's just smoke and not fire. But from Ganzen Hemshach Parsha Dokum too is because the whole flow of the Parsha here, it turns out, it comes out as Yoredol of Mamish. Everything else tells us that Hashem actually descended. Mamish descended. And the river is the posting Vaharsina Oshan Kulei. So therefore, when it says it's just smoke, it only makes a doubt. Yochutz Yordol Mamish. Did he actually descend? But we can't conclude that he did not descend because it's only smoking and not fire, because it doesn't fit. Generally, it seems like Hashem actually descended. As opposed to the portion after Matan Torah, where over there it says, you have seen that I spoke with you from the Shemayim. Over there, the emphasis is the opposite. There is how Hashem, who is high, weit von Oretz, and distant from the world, from the earth. On the river, the pasuk concludes, Loisasun iti, don't make with me, Loisasun the mus shamosai ham shamshun lefonei b'moreh. Don't make any images, the images of those who serve me in the heavens. So we're talking about emphasizing the heavens where Hashem is high up. On the far is the Pirush Harishon Ve'ikli Dort. Therefore, the first and main interpretation of Pshuta Shel Mikra in the simple of the pasuk, in that pasuk over there, as Kvoide V'Shamayim, that Hashem's glory is stuck in the heaven. It's only that his fire and his strength is on the earth, but Hashem himself is V'Shamayim. The honors of Aloit them Pirush is Mudgesh, because in this interpretation of Rashi, the first interpretation, the emphasis, it's emphasized the Echekait von dem Eibishter min haaretz, how Hashem is higher than the earth. Min haaretz. Kvoide is nit arop al Har Sinai nor geblieben b'Shamayim. Hashem's glory did not descend on Mount Sinai, but remained above in the Shemayim. This describes the higher is of Hashem's being above. but the second interpretation in Rashi, as Hirchin Shomayim Chulu, does Hashem lowered the heavens, is Nidglatik the Hadgoshe. So over there, it's not smooth. Why does the pasuk emphasize? It's not so much the Shemaim is no longer, it's below. As the Eibishter had geret. Hashem spoke from a hoich and weit nor Shemaim. Hashem spoke from a high and far place from Shemaim. As the Shemaim zijn gor geworden, Rav Ginit al-Aretz. It's not so far because the Shemaim are on the Aretz, according to the second interpretation. Even Har Sinai, Mount Sinai. So why would the Torah emphasize that? So the second Parsh interpretation is not so close to the Pshat and the pasuk. That's why it's second in that pasuk. Move on. This is also explains. Favos zokt Rashi. Why Rashi over here says Hirchin Shomayim Ha'elyonim v'Tachtonim, the heavens of the above and below. That's the Lashon Rashi in the first time in Yutes Chof. Und dort in Chof Yutes after Magdor says Hirchin Shomayim u'Shmei HaShomayim. The kavona from Pirush Rashi do, Rashi's intention over here is to masbir zayin, is to explain the toichen from the parsha, to explain the ideas, the contents of the parsha, the yerida from Eibers to Nefen Har, how Hashem descended on the mountain. Not in an Eifen, Hashem came down, but it was done in a way, was his nit bistira zu kimin hashemayim goimer. It does not contradict. Hashem still is min hashemayim. Har Sinai ocean goimer, that it's only smoke and not fire. But we're trying to say how Hashem descended, where the emphasis is on the descent, and yet it's not fully descended. But we're talking about descent. And since from these verses it turns out, number one, all of us that Eibers that are lame, that it was Hashem Himself, Vayered Hashem, and Beis Hotarob Ginidert, Hashem Vayered descended al Har Sinai. Kemen doch nit zogen as Hirchin can't say that Hashem lowered blows ein Shemaim, only one of the heavens. Stop. As zwischen Havai and Har Sinai Eretz is do blows ein Shemaim. That in between Hashem and the Sinai, there's only one, which is the Eretz, is only one Shemaim. On the river moves Rashi zu legen. Rashi has to add. It's not just the Shemayim, as Shemayim domain, alle Shemayim. That means all of the Shemayims. Helyonim, Vetachtonim, everything that is in between, the Eibishter brought it all down. Since we're talking about the descent, Nutz Rashi need them Loshen HaKosov that brings down Rashi later on. The was Shemayim, Ushmei Shemayim, the heavens, which was just a description about what's going on, nor Aloshim was his masim to Inyan from Yerida. Rashi uses a language which fits descent, which is the upper and lower, they're all coming down. So that's why in our Rashi, he brings down because we're talking about lowering. That goes over there. Rashi is coming to emphasize, to explain the emphasis. That it is from the heavens. Not in an Eifen. It's from the heavens, but it shouldn't contradict, as it's only Zayin. It still says Hashem Har Sinai. On the river lake Rashi too. That's what Rashi adds. As Choch Hirchin Shemayim. Notwithstanding that, although Hashem lowered the Shemayim, but this is mimayit in the Hadgosha fun min Shemayim. This takes away, diminishes. It's not fully, but Hashem lowered. Fun min Shemayim can also say, aber der Hirchin Shemayim, but this that he lowered is Koilech Shemayim Shmei Shemayim. That this includes the heavens and the Shmei Shemayim. Was das is Magdil the Hecherkeit von dem Ort. This increases the higher level of the place. This Shemayim. Yes, Hirchim. But what did Hirchim is still in the Shemayim Shmei Shemayim? Der Eibishter gerät von Al-Gabi Shmei Shemayim, that Hashem spoke from the heavens of the heavens. Nor we haben sich gefunden, but in the way that they were on the mountains. But on the mountains itself, it's from the Shemayim Shmei Shemayim. The emphasis is on the high. Zay. Now the Rebbe is going to explain why Rashi has to bring down the point, the hitzia, over here that he spread it out. Zayin, the Baal, that's what the Hemshech HaParsha do. Kumtuis. In our pasuk. Sorry, in our pasuk. In our pasuk it says, Vayered Hashem, is given in an Eifen. Was the Kedushas HaShechina is given in Har Bizas, the Har B'Kidashte. That the sanctity of the Shechina was on the mountain to the extent that made it holy, that the mountain became Hashem descended, made the mountain canal. Is that Maskvik was Hirchim Shemayim Chulu? It's not sufficient that he just lowered it. But those that Zelt Norvis is given, that just relates how Hashem descended in a general way that he brought everything down. But it doesn't tell us about the way the descent was. As the Eibishter is Arab of an Har Sinai, that he descended on Mount Sinai, Bizas the Har Bakumra Kedusha. To the extent that the mountain got a Kedusha, we don't know that. It's just that he came down. The Ribber was Rashi do by us. Rashi has to Maisiv Zayin, has to have the Itzion al Gabe Har, and he spread him out over the mountain. As he's given, Avegulated, not just Hashem descended, bended down, but it was laid Oifun Har. Unochmer, not just laid out, but Kimatza Alamita, like a spread on the bed. Was der Matze is nicht a besondere. Chosh vezach for sich. The spread of the bed is not a separate entity by itself. She's nor she was a tail from the meter. This becomes a part of the bed. Same thing in our case. The Shemaim sind nicht geblieben a besondere Sach von dem Har. The heavens did not remain a separate matter from the mountain. Nor sie seien geworden, the Matze von Har. They became the spread of the mountain. Und der Far is the Kedushas HaShechina given von Har Gufa. That's why the sanctity of the mountain was on the mountain itself. That's why Rashi has all these details over here. Aber in Posik, Kimin HaShemayim Goimer. But in the Posik HaShemayim, who the Adgoshi is, over there the emphasis is with the Eberster, hat gerät min HaShemayim nicht von Oretz, it was still from HaShemayim. Can Rashi nicht sagen, as der Posik meint Madgish sein? Rashi doesn't want to say that the verse means to emphasize like Rashi says over there, he spread them out like a spread on a bed. But that would emphasize the opposite, the descent. We're trying to say that Hashem is still in Hashemayim. As the Shemaim then given bottle zum Har Oretz, that would tell us that the Shemaim is secondary and subjugated to the mountain, the Oretz, if he spread it out. So we don't want to say that out. So why does Rashi have to say spread out at all? Rashi muss aber euch dort zulegen, wie Zion. Rashi still has to add that he spread it out, because just by saying that he lowered, that need for entfer the stira from Vayered Havai Har Sinai. Then it doesn't really answer, if he just lowered him, that doesn't answer the contradiction that Hashem descended on Har Sinai. Was is koilel? As is given kedusha from Har Gufa. When we say that Hashem descended on Har Sinai, means that it was. So the other pasuk, where it said Vayered Har Sinai, our pasuk in Yutascha before the Aser Zadiris, it still says that there was kedusha in Har Gufa. The Rebbe muss Rashi sagen v'Yitzia. As the Shemaim are nicht geblieben hecher von Har Sinai. Can't say they remained higher, but it's on Alahor. But it doesn't bring down the whole like a mita and everything else to minimize in the connection. Meet is move on. Was Rashi darf zulegen the Reihe from Posik Vayet Shemayim Vayered. Now we also understand why Rashi needs to bring down also the evidence from the verse Vayet Shemayim Vayered. The Raya from Posik is of them. The evidence in the verse is on this as mer vivayet shamayim was made ha'hirchim, that the Posik does not say anything above beyond vayet shamayim. Hirchim is the Posik nit madgish. Is azoy erg b'Posik min hashamayim. That this Posik min hashamayim is also the same thing. It doesn't emphasize the descent, it doesn't emphasize the came down, but it's still the Shemayim. The psukim reden nicht wegen Kematzalamita. These psukim do not talk about like a spread over a bed. Was dann wird ois Shemayim. Then it's no longer Shemayim. The Shemayim becomes secondary. The Shemayim matzah wird tatel v'dem harmata. In that case, if we talk about like a spread, then it means it loses its entity of Shemayim and it becomes like the mata. Nor Hitzion is blois a hemshech von Hirchim. Hitzion is merely a continuation of the lowering, so it did go to the mountain, but it didn't become secondary to the mountain. As vert nichlal in them vayet. That's part of the vayet, is that he spread it. He bent down the Shemayim up to the mountain, but nit mer vidos, just that. They still remain Shemayim. Farzich was the far past the Adgosha. That's why it's fitting. The emphasis at the Brisem Kimina Shemayim the Barti of Mochem, that he spoke for them Mina Shemayim. So now the Rebbe is going to explain the last question we had. Why does Rashi change and said the Kisa Kovid versus Vayered Hashem in our posik in Yutes Chov? That based on the above, Rashi intention is to explain the protev Vayfanei Yerida from the Meibishter Har Sinai, the details how Hashem descended on the Mount Sinai. Is moving from what Rashi zogt. It also understood what Rashi says. The throne of honor descended on them. By Mitzrayim steht, Vavarti be'eretz Mitzrayim goyim. By the exit of Egypt, it says, Hashem says, I will pass in the land of Egypt. And the Eibishter Alein, in his honor by himself, is a Rav Yekumen, descendant in Mitzrayim in Egypt. I will smite all the Bechor. Und von deswegen gefindt man nicht, and still we don't find, as by Yitzias Mitzrayim, so sein der Oshev v'chulu, so there was no smoke over there. Wie by Vayered Hashem Har Sinai. By when Hashem descended Har Sinai, it was all smoky, everything. Over there Hashem descended already too. How come there was no smoke over there? In order to explain the difference between Hashem descending on Mount Sinai, when Hashem descends to save them from Egypt, is Rashi Medayik v'yored kisa koved aleihim. The throne of honor descended. Was kisei vice of his yashus. Kisei points to settled, kviyas, permanence, ungodless and greatness. Ubefrat hakoved, kisei hakoved, umlucha. Das heißt, shows the Gemara. They said by Matan Torah is that Eibishter Gvem his yashus kviyas of Har Sinai. That Eibishter was in a way settled and a permanent on Har Sinai. Mit Koved umlucha, with the honor and the kingdom. Und therefore, hat Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai mitgebracht. That's why Hashem's descent on Har Sinai, it brought along the alle Protimus were that zelt in the parsha, all the details in the parsha, which the fanfare, the smoke, and the changes, because that was a different kind of a descent, not like just descent to punish the Mitzrayim, but in a way of permanence. Test. For the Inyonim Ufloim, the wonders in Inyonim Aderech Haremes V'Hasod, based on a hint and the secret, in Pirush Rashi in Rashi. The Chiluk Hanal, zwischen the zwei Psukim, the difference between the two psukim, the emphasis, whether the descent or the shamayim, the elevation, and that's where Rashi has different pirushim. As though is mudgesh the yerida, that in our pasuk in Yutas Chof is before matter is emphasized the descent. No, the yerida is be'ofen von hirchen shamayim chulu, but the way that it was descended, the shamayim also descended. As euch the shamayim sind abgenittet, then also the heavens descended. Und dorten in the second pasuk in Chof, Yutas after Matan Torah, is that Goshas min hashamayim dibarti mochem. That is from the highest, hecher von Oretz, and higher from the earth. Nor v'shamayim sind in a matzah von hirchen. But the shamayim are lowered, and yet they Hashamayim spoke to them, according to the second interpretation of Rashi. Is Baruch in them was their pasuk vayered Hashem Har Sinai. The pasuk vayered Hashem Har Sinai is in Kapitel Yutas pasuk Chof. On their pasuk, the second pasuk, Avik ben Hashamayim Gomer, is Kapitel Chof pasuk Yutas. And that brings down that Yutas, steht in Svarim 19, is the gematria from the milui from Shem Havaya, Shema. When you spell out Yud, that comes out, Yud K, Vav K, that turns out to the level of 45. So over there, what it means is, that when you spell out Yud K Vav K to get the number 45, and you just use the milui minus the Shem Havai itself minus Yud K Vav K, the 26, it's 19. So because 45 minus 26 is 19. So that's the gematria from the milui of the Shem Havaya, the Shema. With the Inyan HaMilui, what is when we say milui, the fill of the Yud K Vav K? Is when you say the words in speech, when you write it, you just write the letters Yud K Vav K. But when you speak, you say Yud, have the milui. Kilu Helam, reveal the hidden. Und in Spheres, when we talk about the Spheres, is thus Spheres HaMalchus. So that is the sphere of Malchus. Chof is Rosh Tevis Keser. So 19 is Malchus, and Chof is Keser. Higher was Keser. Chof represents the word Keser, which is Keser is Makif on Hecher Meseder Shtalshus. Keser surrounds and is higher than the order of the Shtalshus. Shtalshus is from Atzilus, and Keser is higher than Atzilus, higher than Abiyah. Bald, as all Sephiras and Eklul Zumizu, since all Sephiras are included one from the other, is in Keser Faran Malchus of Keser. So in Keser we have the Malchus of Keser. Thus says the Keser, what is the level within Keser, the level of Malchus? The Keser was his Hecher from Welt, Keser, which is the highest state in Atenu from Gilamata Malchus, is standing in a movement, in a way of revealing below Malchus. That's the Malchus of Keser. Nazoi Oich is in Malchus, the same thing is in Malchus, is for an Keser Shabbat Malchus. You have the Keser within Malchus. As in Malchus, Almudin Galin, in Malchus, which is the revealed word, Bert is Gale Keser is revealed Keser. Und das ist the Chilik zwischen the zwei Psukim. And this is the difference in two Psukim. Kapitel Yutes Pasuk Chof. Yutes Chof. That's Malchus. Keser Shabbat Malchus. Adar Chof is a prat in them Yutes. That the Chof, the Keser is a detail of Yutes. Weist of Keser Shabbat Malchus. That points to Keser in Malchus. Und der Fahr is sein dem Kapitels klole dicker teuchen, and that's why the general idea of this chapter, Yerida, it's descent, it's Malchus. Kapitel is Kapitel Yutes. We're talking about the descent of Hashem into Har Sinai. Now Rashi, Yena Shel Torah is Megale, but Rashi, the Yena Torah reveals that Voshteit in Ode Yerida. What is there? Hirchin Shamayim Chulu Kesher Malchus. That you have the Shamayim, the Kesher Malchus descent. So it's possible you test, and we get down the Shamayim, the Kesher Malchus. Ober Kapitel Chof Posik Yutes. Over there, as Yutes is a Prat Chof. Chapter 20, verse 19. Is the 19 is a detail in the Chof? It's a detail in the Kesher Weist. That shows him Machshav Kesser. The Far is a Teichen Klol Min HaShamayim. First it's Shamayim, it's Kesser Makif. With the Eibishter is abgetragen from Welt. Hashem is removed from the world. Kesser. Und euch there's Rashi Megale. Here Rashi reveals, Ados is not wie Kesser is La'atzma Behelam. It's not as it's Behelam, nor Hirchin Shamayim, Chulu Malchus Shebi Kesser. That he lowered the Shamayim. It's the Malchus within Kesser. Yud, das is the bir pnim in them. So the inner explanation was the Pirush Pasik Vayered Goimer and his interpretation. The verse Vayered Zokt Rashi Kimatzo al Hamito. Like a spread over a bed. When even Pasik in Hashemayim is a das mashbet, he doesn't bring it down. The Baal das Keser Shebe Malchus is a prat in Sfiras HaMalchus. Is a detail in the Sfir of Malchus. Bosinyon is Yerida Lamata, which the idea is to descend below. That's Malchus Almadis Gallion, and the Kesser is a detail in that. Is Eichenim Kesser Shebo Shayich HaYerida. So even in the Kesser, there is a descent, Unislapshus Lamata. It goes down, Biskimatza Lamita. The descent goes like a spread over the bed, Kenal Siv Zayin. I said earlier in Siv Zayin, Mashen Ken Malchus Shebi Kesser. We talk about Malchus in Kesser. Od does was Kesser is Meir Lamato. The fact that Kesser Lamato, Vibal das Kesser is Be'etzem. And Oirvos is Hechvan Elma, since Kesser in essence is a light which is beyond the world. Is Oirvenes is Meir Lamato. Even when it shines below, Malchus should be Kesser. Is es nicht in an Oifen, was es sich mislabish say. It's not in the way that it is mislabish in them, but a blight the bchinas makif, but it remains in a way of makif shamayim. Wow, this is interesting. But the Rebbe also brought down over here that the Shema the Milui 19 points to the level of Malchus, because Ma itself is Malchus. The Rebbe didn't elaborate over there. In any event, this is Mesiches, Shabbos Parshas Yisro, and Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim, Tavshin Lamed Vov.